What is a U.S. savings bond? Well, a U.S. savings bond is a bond issued by the U.S. government. And U.S. savings bonds are often considered one of the safest investments that you can make, if not the safest.
Are you ready for a successful retirement? We're addressing the topics facing today's retirees. Welcome to Retire with Ryan. Now here's your host, Ryan Morrissey.
Welcome back. If you listened to last week's episode, What is the Ideal Asset Allocation in Retirement?, then you'll know that owning bonds is a key part of your asset allocation. However, one of the challenges with owning bonds at the present time is their low return. This is especially challenging given the recent spike in inflation, as measured by the Consumer Price Index, meaning that many bonds now have a negative return. For example, if you have a bond paying you 2%, but inflation is 6%, then you're actually earning a negative return of 4% in real terms. However, there is a certain U.S. government savings bond that adjusts for inflation, known as the I bond, and this bond is now significantly more attractive for investors. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about I bonds, how they work, how you can invest in them, and what some of the drawbacks are. So first off, what is a U.S. savings bond? Well, a U.S. savings bond is a bond issued by the U.S. government, and U.S. savings bonds are often considered one of the safest investments that you can make, if not the safest. And the reason is the stability of our government and our payment history. The U.S. government has never defaulted on its debt, meaning that it's always paid its interest on time and its principal back to investors on time. So that makes this investment very attractive. And there's multiple types of U.S. savings bonds. However, many of these are paying very little to no interest at the present time. For example, the 10-year U.S. savings bond, which is kind of the benchmark in the bond market, is paying 1.954%, which means that if you were to buy a 10-year U.S. savings bond today, you'd earn 1.954% per year, which is definitely a decent return. But, as we go back to my prior example, if inflation continues to run as high as it is, you actually have a negative return with this investment. But that return is actually better than it's been recently, because just as far back as January 24th, the 10-year U.S. government savings bond rate was 1.7%. And if we go back to the pandemic in April of 2020, this same bond, 10-year U.S. government bond, was paying 0.571%. So let's talk about the I bond and how that works. So the I bond stands for inflation. And the interest that you receive on the I bond has two components. One component is the fixed rate. The other component is tied to inflation as measured by the Consumer Price Index. And currently, the fixed rate is 0, so you're still not getting anything on that. But the good news is that because inflation has been so high recently, the Consumer Price Index rate, the interest rate on inflation, is paying 7.12%. So that's why I bonds are so attractive. And with I bonds, that rate, the composite rate, is announced twice a year, on May 1st and on November 1st. And just to put it in context, the last rate prior to November was 3.5%. So the I bond has been pretty attractive over the last year. We'd have to go back to May of 2020 to find another time where the I bond was over 7%. The rate in May of 2020 was actually 7.49%. If you go to the Treasury Direct website, you can see all the past fixed rates and the past inflation rates, and you can add those together to determine what the composite rate was for that time frame. Now, we don't know what the rate will be when it's reannounced this May, but we do know that the rate can never go below 0. Deflation is the opposite of inflation. With deflationary environment, the price of goods are going down, and even if we had negative Consumer Price Index number, which is possible, we've had it before, you still will not earn anything less than 0 on these bonds. I should also point out, too, that you might be thinking, wow, I can earn 7.12% on this bond. That's an attractive return, and that definitely is. But these rates haven't been this high for a very long time. And if you look back over the last 10 years at what the composite rates were, they were hovering around 1%. So you have to temper your expectations with these bonds and not think, well, if I buy one of these, I'm going to earn 7.1% every year. That's not the case. That's going to be for the next 6 months. And then after that, the rate will adjust. and it will adjust based on when you buy it. So let's just say, for example, you're listening to this and you want to invest in I-bonds and you buy it in February. You would earn that 7.12% interest for the next 6 months. And then your 6-month interest rate after that would be based on where the rate is adjusted this coming May. And this adjustment in interest rates would continue for as long as you own the bond. Some of the other positive features are that you don't pay interest on the bonds while they are deferred. And you can defer them for up to 30 years. Meaning that you can invest in these bonds, they can earn interest, the interest can stay deferred, and then at the end of the 30-year period, you'd have to pay tax on them, or you could take them out sometime before then. But during that 30-year period, you wouldn't pay any tax on the interest you're earning. They also don't require a lot of maintenance. You don't have to do anything with the bonds once you purchase them. They will continue to earn interest for up to 30 years. That interest will be adjusted twice a year. The only thing you might want to do is just check in twice a year in May and November to see what the current interest rate is so you have an idea of what the interest is that you're earning. And if you use these for educational costs, when you redeem them, there is no federal tax that you will pay. So let's talk about some of the negatives. There are restrictions with these. One of the biggest restrictions is that you can only purchase $10,000 per year per person. So essentially per tax ID or social security number. And the lowest that you can invest is $25. So if you're looking to get started, you have a small amount to invest, you can start with $25. Because of this $10,000 limitation, this can be an issue for you if you have a lot of money in the bank, not earning much interest. Unfortunately, that's where we're currently at. You'll know if you go to your local bank or you check for online interest rates at a website like bankrate.com that I mentioned from time to time, you'll probably find about 0.5% on money market and maybe 1% on a CD. So not very good. So this is obviously much more attractive than this, but the challenge is that $10,000 annual limit. So let's just say that you're married, you and your spouse could each contribute $10,000. And if you have children, you could also set up an account for them. If you have grandchildren, you could do the same thing. The only thing I would just caution you about setting an account up for your grandchild is make sure that you talk to your son or daughter before you do this, because this could complicate a FAFSA application for your grandchild, because this would be an asset now in their name. So there is some consideration there. But the other thing that can be set up is that if you have any separate entities, such as a trust, an estate, a corporation, or a partnership, you can also set up accounts for those entities as well. So that's another way that you can keep adding to this $10,000 limit to maybe get yourself invested a good amount of money in this first year. And you could continue to make additional $10,000 investments each year. And over time, if you had a good amount of money in money market or at your bank that wasn't earning you interest and you wanted to get it in here, that would be a way to do it. One other way to make an investment above and beyond the $10,000 limit is that you can invest up to $5,000 of your tax return into paper I-bonds. So that's a little different because most I-bond purchases that you do are going to be non-paper, but you can put $5,000 in. So this is a way that instead of there being a $10,000 limit, it would raise it up to a $15,000 limit. And it's based on how you file your tax return. Many married couples file a joint return. If that's the case, then your limit is $5,000 between you and your spouse. It's not $5,000 per person. If you happen to file married filing separately, then you could each do the $5,000 additional investment per person. However, there are negatives with filing separately, so you'd really have to weigh that benefit. You also have to have a refund owed to you. And if you don't have a refund and you want to get one for the purpose of putting more in I-bonds, then you need to make sure you adjust your tax withholding, either on your retirement income or your employment income, so that you do have a refund that you could invest in these. If you do make this paper investment, you probably want to consider converting them to an electronic investment, and that can be done online through the Treasury website, the Smart Exchange, I believe is what they call it. And why you would probably want to do this is there's a lot of negatives with holding any bond in paper form. It could be lost, it could be stolen, it could be accidentally destroyed through a fire, through a flood, and it's a lot easier probably to have it online. Some of the other restrictions are that you can't sell them for 1 year after the initial purchase. So keep that in mind. After the 1 year, you can redeem it. If you then redeem it before you've owned it for 5 years, you would then give up 3 months of interest. So that's another negative if you redeem them before 5 years. After you've owned it for 5 years, there is no penalty for redeeming it. You would just sell it at whatever the current value of it is. But let's just say this is appealing to you and you're okay investing the money for 1 year and you want to think about what your worst case scenario would be. Well, we know that if you buy it before May 1st, your interest rate will be 7.12% for the 6 months after that. Let's say you hold it for the year, and when the next renewal comes out in May, it's at 0%. There's no inflation this coming May as measured by the Consumer Price Index. So the worst you will do is 3.56% because you'll earn 6 months of 7.12%. For many people, that's probably a much better investment than if this money was in your bank account, if it was in money market. So there could be a positive for many people of doing this, even weighing the negative that you can't sell it for a year and that there's a possibility after 6 months to earn 0% interest for the next 6 months. So how do you actually buy these? Well, as I mentioned before, you do it through the Treasury website. It's treasurydirect.gov. So you have to go there and open an account. And they do have some good security benefits where they use two-factor authentication, which means that you'll have to add an email address or a cell phone so that you get a code so that you can log in. This is good because it will protect your account from getting stolen by a hacker. So it's a little harder to log into than a checking account. You also have to do it on your own in the sense that, as many of you know, I am a financial planner. I cannot open these accounts for my clients. I can't help you buy these, unfortunately. These are direct investments. So you will have to go on your own, set up the account at the Treasury Direct website, and make the investment from a checking account or a savings account, depending on how much you want to initially invest. One other thing to think about is you want to make sure you incorporate this into your estate plan. And the easiest way to do this is when you're setting up the account. For many married couples, an easy solution to that would be to set up the account jointly with your spouse. That way, if one of you passes away, whatever's in this Treasury Direct account will go to the other spouse. You could determine not to do that and just leave it in your single name only, but now it would be part of your estate when you pass away, and it would just make it a little bit harder for whoever you want to take over this account to access it. And you also want to make sure that you let your beneficiaries know where this is. You don't want this to become a lost asset, right? Because it's going to exist online, right? Something that you're not going to physically have. You want to have some records somewhere so that people know where the account is so they can go and get any money that's left over in the account upon your passing and not have it be something that's forgotten. Especially the fact that if you're deferring the interest on these bonds, so it's not going to show up on your tax return while it's being deferred. So it will be harder for somebody to find if you don't let them know. So I hope this was helpful on understanding I-bonds and how they can help you increase your return on your savings or your checking or just money that you have sitting around. And as a reminder, my retirement readiness workshops are beginning in March. If you need additional help planning your retirement and you're looking to get a good overview of the things that you need to be thinking about, consider attending my course. You can sign up for it by going to retirewithryan.com, then clicking on Attend Our Retirement Readiness Workshop. Have a great week, and I look forward to talking to you next Wednesday. Take care.
You should consult a financial advisor familiar with your specific circumstances before you make any financial decisions. Nothing in this broadcast constitutes a solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities. Any mention of rates of return are historical or hypothetical in nature and are not a guarantee of future returns. Ryan Morrissey, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Morrissey Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor.